Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading the last part of Snow Treasure. And I need to begin on at the end of chapter 29 because the last time I recorded, it stopped recording with about 4 more sentences to go. So I'll begin with the last 2 paragraphs. Rawls, Uncle Victor's mate, was holding him. There was another sodden mass on the bottom of the boat. It was Jan Lasik. Peter heard them say his name, but now he found he was beyond caring about anything. The boat he knew was Kling Pearson's lifeboat. Strong arms were pulling it toward the fishing smack, so they were able to escape the Nazis. Both the Polish soldier who rescued Peter from the jail and Peter himself. Chapter 30. Peter was dry and warm in Uncle Victor's cabin. The coast of Norway was somewhere out in the blackness. The Atlantic rolled and the Kling Pearson pitched, and Peter was jounced up and down with the wash of the waves. Ahead lay America. So Peter was going to America. He was going to see New York and go to Pittsburgh with Jan Lasik and then travel to Minnesota, where his uncle was a professor in St. Olaf's College in Northfield. Uncle Victor would arrange it, he said. You can be admitted as a minor in my custody. Our minister in Washington will do that much for us. He'll be only too glad to do something in return for all of the gold. But what about Jan Lasik? Peter asked. How can he go without a passport? Oh, but he has a passport, the one that was stolen. There'll be a record of it in Washington, and they'll be grateful for the information about the one who is masquerading in his name. They won't be long finding him. Peter was overjoyed with this good news for Jan. Since he had risked his life for him, there was no reward too high. Uncle Victor said something like this. It wasn't as easy for Jan as it looks, Peter. He ran a grave risk. He did it simply because I didn't feel right about sailing and leaving you there. Of course, he knew the routine of the camp. He knew that at supper hour, the barracks would be deserted, except for the mess hall. And he knew about the side door and the sentry. But he was still in danger of being caught himself. If one little thing had gone wrong, he would have been caught. He had his uniform, too, Peter mused. One German uniform looks pretty much like another. Then a thought struck him. But how did he get the key to open the cell door? He wanted to know. The keys are kept on a panel in the guard room. The room was empty while the guard was at the mess having dinner. All Jan had to do was slip in, take the key marked Das Gefängnis. That means jail. His uncle went on. All that part was easy. The only hard part was getting him to the barracks without his being seen on the way there, for he was being looked for everywhere. So we don't dare have him go by foot from the Snake to the beach and barracks. It was Rawls who solved it for us, his uncle went on. He suggested that since the roads were being watched, we might have a landing in water. The Kling was pretty well covered by camouflage, so she could be moved to the mouth of the Snake, where it meets the big fjord. We were lucky it was a bad night. The rain and mist shortens the day. When it got dark, Rawls and Hans Torp and Sten lowered the lifeboat and rowed him right up to the fishing pier. But they couldn't wait for him because it was too dangerous. They had to get back to the cover of the Kling. That's why you had to swim so far. But how did Jan get past the sentries into the barracks? Just the same way you got out. He waited for one to come up, turn, and start back. The minute his back was turned, he stepped inside the door. It isn't bolted till taps, and Jan knew that. The sentry was there to guard that every door, but there are ways to get past sentries if you can think of those ways. Wasn't Jan afraid he'd be caught when he got inside the barracks? Of course, terribly, but he had to risk it. He did that for me? For you, and because I said I'd take him to America if he got you out. We heard the soldiers marching in the hallway. Were they coming to get me? Whether they were or not, you and Jan would have been in a pretty tight place if you'd run into them. Peter fell back in the bunk. So I'm going to America, but what about Mother and Lovisa and Bunny? Peter, I know you think it's high-handed of me to be taking you this long distance without so much as asking if you wanted to go, but there was nothing else to do. I couldn't go all the way across the Atlantic Ocean without knowing what would become of you. And when I got you on board, there was nothing to do with you but take you along. We daren't turn back with all this gold. Oh, Victor, Uncle Victor, it isn't that. Only what? Well, when Father left, he said I was the man of the family and was to look after the others. Peter, don't worry about your mother's not being able to look out for herself and for her children. And although I'm sorry I have to tell you this, your father may soon be home. The British have withdrawn their forces from much of the coast. Our army is putting up a magnificent defense, but it's only a question of time until it can no longer hold out. Then the order will come to cease firing. Peter thought about the night his father had gone away, the night of the first blackout, and of all the things that had happened since. It's a shame, Peter, for you to be leaving without so much as saying goodbye to your family, and Helga, and Michael, and Per Garson, and the others, but your mother was glad when I told her what we were going to try to do. You know, she had gone to the Holmes to warn them that the missing Nazi might be in their barn. When Lovisa got to the farm with the news of what happened to you, she strapped on her skis and took the back trail through the woods to the Snake. Take him to America by all means, she said. I want him to grow up in a country where people are free. She asked to have you promise that you will always remember you come of liberty-loving people who think freedom is a greater heritage than gold. There was a clatter of steps in the companionway. Rolls came into the cabin. Submarine off starboard, he said. Uncle Victor jumped to his feet in alarm. Then he saw the sheepish grin on Roll's face. But it's a British sub. He spoke lamely. The Kling's doing 5 knots in this sea, he added. She ought to ride well, Uncle Victor answered. She's got a cargo of gold for ballast. The flag of Norway was draped above the map of the bulkhead. Into the cabin came the notes of a cornet. It's my old horn. I lent it to the Polish boy, Rolls explained. In the galley, Jan Lassik was practicing the Star-Spangled Banner. Well, now we ask the question, did this story really happen? And I don't know if this is in your book, but it is in mine. Did this really happen? On June 28, 1940, nearly a year after World War II broke out of Europe, the Norwegian freighter Bama reached Baltimore with a cargo of gold bullion worth $9 million. When the Bama's captain asked for a police escort while unloading the bullion, a strange story came to light. The gold, it was reported, had slipped past Nazi sentries by Norwegian boys and girls. Under the very eyes of the enemy, the story went, these children had pulled the gold on their sleds to a freighter hidden in a fjord off Norway's coast, so that no harm might come of the brave children. The captain would not tell the location of the fjord. For many years, this story was believed true, but over 40 years later, there is no proof that it ever really happened. We do not know, but we do know that the story captures the courage of many children who, caught up in war, have helped their country in a time of great danger. I've also looked up some other details about this myself, and it is true that gold did leave Norway and came to the United States. In the Baltimore Sun in 1940, they reported it, and they didn't say anything about children helping in the smuggling of the gold out of Norway. But in 1941, in an Australian newspaper, they reported that 15 million pounds in gold bullion, packed in 1,500 crates and requiring 30 trucks, had been smuggled past German troops from Oslo to Andalstes, 480 kilometers, where British warships were waiting. Hiding by day in forests and lonely belts of country and traveling by night, they slowly crept northward. It later goes on to say that the trucks and reached villages, and they needed to get the gold to a ship. That night, Norwegian patriots, men, women, and children, were gathered together and told what lay in those cases. Every type of craft still afloat was crewed, and the gold put on board. Small fjord boats, fishing smacks, yachts, motorboats, pleasure crafts, and rowboats all set off that night and crept along the coast till they got to the British destroyers to load the gold. Then, speaking in 2001, O.C. Holm, an expert on World War II Norwegian shipping, said, "Many think the story is true. It is not." But he did confirm that 40 million kroner, which is the Norwegian money, worth of gold did make it to Baltimore. And that a Norwegian ship transported gold to the U.S., but that the story of the children is fiction. Well, I'll let you decide what you think. I think that probably when they had the gold, according to the Australian article, that children were also used to try and sneak it past the Nazis to get it into the boats. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. I'm sorry that I had a lapse for a while, but I wasn't feeling well, and but I did want to finish this book. Thank you. Bye-bye.